Hi, I'm Andy Packham, Chief Architect at the Microsoft ecosystem at HCLTech. And I'm here today talking about AI, how AI has driven innovation, but importantly, how you take AI and convert that into value. So I'd like to start off by asking, Stephanie, if it's okay, I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure.
We talk a lot about innovation, but where do you see those big innovations in this entire space coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously data is information and it's used by everybody and everybody needs information in their role. I see the driving force of the innovation coming from the people who are making decisions, and the role of data is to just be as seamless as possible in that. So I think it's about driving collaboration through easy access and use of data. To me, data is as essential as a laptop or an employee. Like, it's just one of the fundamental needs of a business. So we need to be able to process it, to store it, and to make it accessible to people when they need it, with the controls in place to enable them to drive to enable anybody in any role to drive innovation for the particular business area that they're working in.
And Nick, I mean, you're from a very different business, but do you see the same sort of drivers of innovation, or for you, is it something else?
So, no, it's the same, exactly. Everything is data, though. So if you think about it, a lot of people are doing a lot of manual processes currently, but even if they're doing manual in concepts or types of data that you wouldn't necessarily traditionally call data, that is still an expertise. They're looking for specific things within whatever it is. Say they're a lawyer looking at contracts, or if they're if they're dealing with invoices and processing those, they can be in. They're not in wouldn't be necessarily called traditional data, but the way that they're processing that can be seen as data processing, information processing. And so, it's just taking it away from, rows of data in a database and into more unstructured or just more variety. And then, I really see it as in terms of the way that innovation is happening, is enhancing or augmenting those employees' capabilities and making them more productive, more efficient, ultimately making their lives easier. And that's where I see the trajectory of certainly the data stack within a company going.
Thank you. So, Robbie, at Microsoft, you've been innovating like crazy. Again, the same sort of question of where do you see those innovations taking us in terms of driving the value?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, we've in terms of the AI space, we've been trying to, we build out those tools, and then our customers, our partners use those tools to give themselves competitive advantage. So we've been doing that. We started the whole democratization of AI back in around 2012-ish, and I think at that time Satya said every developer can be an AI developer. Obviously, jump forward like 12 years from there, every developer is an AI developer. So yeah, obviously we try and make AI, machine learning, available and accessible to everyone, just as we do with other technologies. But I think that with the generative AI, it's been the ultimate democratizer of AI. So because it's a chat interface, people can talk to it. They can understand. What it's doing. I can understand how it's talking back to them. So I think from innovations also being driven from a kind of socio-economic sense, because we're now in like a new epoch of technology. We had the internet, and it was the case that if you didn't have an internet page, you weren't really seen as a real serious company. Now we're getting to the point that if you don't have Gen AI, if you don't have some kind of chat interface or natural language processing within your product, you're kind of falling a bit behind the trend. So yeah.
I see it as there's a pyramid involved in different sort of data capabilities. My view is it's and companies will be in various, I guess, levels of progression as they build this pyramid up. But my view is that the bottom layer is, very basic data visualization, Power BI type activity. That's where it tends to start within organizations, as where people are starting to become data literate, and you're starting to get that progression. Then you move to the sort of data prep type capabilities, and then it's the automation of the bottom two. So that then means that frees up more time and more allows employees to become more sophisticated to move on to the next level and the next one being machine learning, then models, and then eventually the AI right at the top of that pyramid. So that's how I see it as a foundation of building within an organization, and you've got to make your way up the pyramid to before you can put AI in your product. You kind of need all those foundation levels as well.
I'm interested in that kind of talk about the model of that this sort of triangle shape. Like, do you see that across the organization, or in different areas? Do you see because obviously maturities can change between different processes, like we're automating here and we're still not automating over here. We've done a POC of this over here. Like, how do you see that kind of building the standards as well? Because sometimes it's like, once you've done one thing at the top of that pyramid, you kind of want to say everything's already at the top, but you kind of then got to go back down to the bottom.
Yeah, it's not standard across the organisation. We've got very diverse businesses, and some are faster than others, and by the very nature of those particular businesses that they're dealing with, and some of them are advancing much more speed than the others. We also see a disconnect between the top of the house as well. So in terms of what the board thinks we are doing in terms of AI, which is quite progressive. They think that we're doing quite a lot of things, and then at the sort of coal face, we're also seeing a lot of people using maybe they don't realise they're using AI. They're not, but not. Fundamentally, it's around automation and data visualization and more practical applications, but the layer in between is the dark age. They really are, because their priorities are, the board are wanting to make decisions based on these new innovations, and the people doing the actual work see real benefit from doing it themselves. But the layer in between are really still not focused on that. They're focused on either revenue or cost savings. And that's their primary focus, to the almost exclusion of other things. So that's the area that I'd like to see better education, and for them to become more data literate and to understand the benefits of some of these things, which I think we're still not there fully.
Yeah, I think that's important. If we're going to democratize this, then we have to democratize it in a way that actually is from the top to the bottom. And Srini, I know you have so many conversations. Is that what you see, this kind of challenge between the top of the organization, the vision maybe, and the ability, the execution?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you look at it, right, so I probably, take your pyramid and convert it into a value chain, if I may.
Yeah.
So, AI will definitely transform experiences. I think, we were talking about it, right? Yes, it's going to drive efficiencies, but I think the biggest benefit is transforming experiences, making things better for customers, things better, employees, humans in general, right? So it has the power. There's no doubt about it. But today, in the world of the business, the efficiencies, are taking precedence because of the economic situations, etc. Right? So while there is focus for that, maybe that's going to drive the investments, which will then start, addressing some of the challenges that we were talking about, right? But if you look at it, as a value chain on the front end, you got AI that can transform experiences for customers, for employees, can drive efficiencies, can, bring in new revenue streams potentially, right? We were talking about internet. If you didn't have internet, now if you don't have NLP as the front end, you got a problem, right? But if you have a better front end, then you can attract more customers. But then on the left side, if you look at it, there's information or data, right? And there's a lot of it, and there's more coming in with every passing day, right? And I think, you talked about it, that, data information is the key. So if you look at it, enterprises, they start looking at data information as an asset rather than cost.
Yeah.
Because to put all this data, you need significant, infrastructure, you need, manpower, you need software and things like that. So it's cost. Then you start looking at it as an asset, right? To then, go from that data as an asset to AI for outcomes. Then suddenly, things start changing, right? You start taking less of a cost view, more in terms of how do I get better return on my assets, right? So I think, so because at the end of the day, there is no AI without data, right? So you cut off the, data feeds to the AI dies. So then now it's a question of how do you progress? So you said it right. I mean, from data, you got to create insights, right? Whether it is Power BI, Tableau, so on and so forth. Then you got to start applying. Then you got to start integrating, because those insights will power AI, right? So those insights will say that this is Andy, this is Srini, right? And not, funny things. So the information is getting converted into insights, right? Which then powers AI. So if you look at it as a, value chain, you got, data as a cost asset, but then you start creating more value as you move from data into creating insights, which themselves can deliver value. But then, you convert those insights into, actionable AI, then you create bigger value because it's transforming experiences, it's driving better productivity, etc.
But there are some controls that need to be in place.
Yes. Absolutely.
So one of the things that we've struggled with, over time, and one of the fears is that AI is going to, be uncontrollable. It's going to lead us to making decisions that we didn't anticipate or didn't want to make. And what I've discovered, managing platforms that have that capability within them, is that there are the banks already has policies around how this should be managed, and has had for 20 odd years. Those policies are specifically designed around traditional technology development, and AI or machine learning and governance around this data flow works in the same way. The trouble or the challenge that we have is that it's not necessarily technology people now doing it. We've got people that are in the front office areas who are now doing the type of things that used to exclusively be done by technology. So they are not necessarily aware that there's all these policies or control frameworks that are in place, system development, lifestyle cycle frameworks that are in place already, and do not want to follow that either. I mean, we've had 25, 30 years of these levels of controls and governance being put on in technology. It's now you cannot do anything in production without ticking off the dozens and dozens of making controls that make sure that you are ready to go live with. That framework is simply not in place for the front office to deal with. Now we have ways and certain policies that allow us to govern them and those things. It really comes down to an awareness more than any kind of enforcement at the moment. If you try and enforce it now, you'll stifle the whole thing. But if you make it make those employees, those people aware of the policies that already exist and they're supposed to be following already, but also not make it scary. And where they'll just go, I'm a data scientist. I'm not interested in following your tech guidelines. But actually they do. And it's about how they interpret them for the particular thing that they're doing. And actually, a lot of it's about interpretation.
I think it's a cultural thing as well. I think driving or pushing for a culture of innovation comes alongside pushing for a culture of, caring about, essentially customer outcomes. And customer outcomes means being careful, like thinking about regulation, thinking about, like all of the regulation, regulation, but, anything else that means that we're doing the best for our customers. I think that driving that culture is the key. And I think that I honestly believe that data is the enabler to drive that culture, because I think that data enables cross-functional collaboration. Like, just it's the glue, it's the information that flows between different teams, and being able to share the outputs of data analyses between different teams, not just the source data that comes from systems, but when we analyze it and then we share, and it enables collaboration. And it's that diversity of thought that comes from the cross-disciplinary area that sparks innovation. And then when people get to innovate and they have the freedom and the enthusiasm, that sparks more. And it kind of, I think it's a snowball effect of, all we need to do is it sounds like it's a small problem, but all we need to do is take away the sort of the blockers to enabling people to access the data in a meaningful way. Yeah. And then people are brilliant, people are innovative, people will do it, like it will happen. Especially if you hire well and sort of focus on making sure that people feel enabled and love coming to work and working on difficult and exciting problems.
I think you're absolutely right about the culture, and Nick, you said something also that I think what's really important that we think about is that a lot of AI today is used to solve traditional problems better. It's improving productivity. But I think there's another area of innovation, which is the stuff we just can't do today. It's too complicated, it's too big, it's too stuff. They're the areas of innovation that I think are the real drivers of value. But also they're the areas that this is entirely new space for us. It's not that I've got tradition to rely on, and they're the ones that are entirely unexpected. I mean, I have a smartphone. I don't use it as a phone anymore. I use it for everything. And that was, never kind of predicted. So, Srini, in this kind of driving this difference to going from making stuff better to doing new stuff, how do you see that thinking of innovation happening on the ground?
Absolutely. I think, the two perspectives we talked about here, right? That I think genuinely represents the challenges, that enterprises are facing. On one hand, you want to foster innovation at the edge being the employee, right? If a company has, tens and thousands and hundreds and thousands of employees, how do you actually foster a culture of innovation, collaboration, create value?
Especially when you've got Chinese walls between areas within them,
exactly, right? But at the same time, like to borrow a quote from somebody, AI is very powerful, so with great power comes great responsibility. So how do you make it responsible? So that presents a huge challenge on IT.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if anything goes wrong at the edge, whether you like it or not, it's IT, that has to answer for it, right? So now this is the big balance. So that's where I think, the governance, is probably going to evolve a lot. I really like what Steph said. It's about the culture.
Yeah.
So you get people to be more responsible, but at the same time, enterprises, cannot afford to take risks or fallouts. So the governance, again, this learning something from, the thinking in economics, right? You're talking about choice architectures. Mm. So the governance then starts, moving towards how do you actually nudge people to do the right things more often than not? And the frameworks and the platforms that you were talking about, how do they make it easier for people to do the right things, right? But innovate, but make it much harder for them to do wrong things. So that's the choice architecture. It's easier said than done. Mm-hmm. As practitioners, we know that, somebody is pulling in a data set because they're trying to do the right things, to your point, right? Data being the fabric or the glue. They're trying to do the right things. But if any exposure of that data can create big problems, for the company, then you wouldn't want to get that data out. And that's that awareness, aspect as well that you're talking about, right? And then we need to make them aware. It's not that we want to stifle innovation, but there's a problem if this goes out. So I think this. I don't think we designed it, but the conversation. But the challenges. This is really the challenge.
Yeah.
How do you innovate at scale? Because we got to believe in the the human power. Right? And the ability to innovate, the ability to collaborate. But how do you govern and control so that the enterprises, don't create risks?
Or more, how do you don't govern and control too much as well? Because that's another thing that we're seeing is that It's an almost paranoia that we've got to keep everything completely locked down. And there are certain data types, data products that you've got to be very careful on. Your crown jewels of your data. But there's an awful lot out there which is ripe for investigation and analytics on, which isn't sensitive, and sometimes even the data guardians don't necessarily know. They just always like this is client data, and therefore thou shalt not touch it, right? Yeah. But that's our most valuable data as well, and there's elements of it which are not sensitive that can be brought forward, right? And it's just being able to navigate that and persuade the right people that you're not going to be leaking this everywhere.
I think there's definitely some sort of like technical, like a huge amount of technical solution of sort of careful by design in the systems that we're building. I think there's also picked up on the point you were making about people get so careful that they stifle, and I think what I've observed time and again is that often happens when those are different people who are these people are tasked with innovating and these people are tasked with being careful. And then they just butt heads. But actually, if you've got a cross-functional team that takes those people together and says, how can we, we're tasking the people who are, whatever their job is, you are tasked with being careful and you are tasked with innovating, come together. And actually, that's where, that collaborative way of building something as a team that everybody can get behind. And then there's different people with different backgrounds in terms of like understanding the risks and how to mitigate them. I think it's again, it all comes back to collaboration.
I think you've got it's the key point. It's we come back to data, but we also come back to people. And I think for me, one of the innovations in a way is that we're suddenly presenting IT people with conversations about ethics, and and that's an uncomfortable conversation. We don't necessarily understand that. So, Robin, I know this is super important to you about how we treat this response. I just like your kind of, how do we help? We can establish policies and stuff, but how do you help change the behaviour of people in IT who we do technology? We don't have conversations about ethics. That's why we're in tech. How do you kind of help?
Absolutely. So, kind of responsible AI we see as being a kind of cultural change in the organisation. So it's not just about one department having ownership for something being developed. Obviously, if you develop something that is harmful to your organisation, the whole organisation is going to suffer, and so everyone needs to be kind of involved in that conversation. So, on a very basic level, cultural-wide understanding of what the technology is, where people's responsibility lies. I mean, if you look at security in an organisation, you don't have an organisation where one person is responsible for security and no one else has to care about security. Everyone has to have an understanding. People aren't supposed to let people in the door. People aren't supposed to share their passwords. This is where we should be with AI to make sure AI is being done effectively. And also kind of AI understanding the harms that you could be causing does also lead into a kind of conversation around diversity and inclusion, because you don't necessarily, if you have a room of just one particular kind of people from a cultural background of one gender, they are not going to be thinking about different things that might cause harm. So bringing in kind of representation across your organisation into new ideas, into new things you're developing, can also help mitigate some of the problems, and also kind of going outside your organisation and talking to people to make sure that you are what you're doing is going to be culturally acceptable for across multiple different cultures.
Yes, I think, just to wrap up, I mean, it's a fantastic conversation, and this ultimate aim of doing this responsibly, of being very, very inclusive, and driving this for the value. We're here to drive this for the value of, for our businesses, but also bearing in mind we're driving it for a wider as sort of, a benefits for society as well. It's hugely important. So, thanks for bringing those points up, and everyone. I think it was a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate all of your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.